Hey everybody, welcome back to Rusty Wrench Restorations. I'm Steve, and today we're finally getting to install the final drives on this 430 crawler. So when we left off last, we had all the components in this both side final drives put together, with the exception of this rod down here for the brake assemblies. As you can see, I had to get some new yoke type pieces, some rod, these plugs that go into the final drive housings themselves, and then there's a rubber boot on here as well. So now we have good, proper working brake systems on both sides that are sealed and prevent debris from getting into the final drives. So as you know, we've rebuilt the final drive for the right hand side. This left hand side was fine. We did replace the fiber discs on both right and left side clutches. So today we're going to start with installing this left side final drive. So if you remember watching the video when we disassembled the final drives, we used a large engine hoist with a hook that went through these top two holes to basically pull and remove the final drive. So I do realize that some of you may not have an engine hoist or a tractor with a loader or some other means of getting these final drives on and off. So I wanted to just kind of show you an example of another way you can install these things. So most everyone has a floor jack. Basically you can just set the final drive onto the floor jack. I use some threaded rods here just as like kind of guide pins to keep everything lined up, and basically just raise the jack until the point where this final drive shaft is ready to go into the throw up bearing sleeve. So we're pretty much at that point. I am going to throw some grease on these splines, and then really it's just a matter of kind of pushing the jack in and closing the final drive up and putting the bolts in. The only thing that sometimes you have to kind of finagle around is you have the brake drum here on the final drive, and then inside is the brake shoe itself, or the brake band. So sometimes you might need to kind of, so I have these access plates off, kind of play around with those things. You can move the steering levers, wiggle it around, and get in here to get this brake drum inside of the brake band. One other thing I recommend doing before putting this final drive together is you can take this opportunity while the final drive is on the jack, that you can turn the hub and it moves the brake drum inside. Get some sanding blocks or sanding paper and just kind of go over this drum. Just wanted to kind of clean it up, make sure there's nothing on there that's going to prevent it from operating inefficiently. Another good thing to do is take some brake cleaner and just go ahead and make sure there's no grease, grime, or debris on that brake drum before we install it. I highly recommend you go inside and you can wet the inside of the brake band as well. If you have grease on there, it's going to be completely ineffective at stopping your crawler or allowing it to steer. All right, so now that the brake components are clean and we put some grease on the shaft, let's go ahead and move this final drive housing in. Again, you just want to kind of make sure you're watching this brake band. These, not the top two bolts, but the next two bolts down are like body bound bolts, and those are really what's going to help align the final drive in the right position. So just be careful with it. Of course, I'm working on a dirt surface here with rubber mats, but should slide in pretty good. You just have to maybe adjust your height a little bit. Now there is another pin back here in the back. I'll put a little grease on here. That's going to slide into that socket on the brake band. So, and don't forget, make sure you have that balance spring, equalizer spring in your differential. Let's see here. There we go. Slide it a little more. Just kind of do some wiggling around. See if I got a flat tip screwdriver here. These long flat tips work good for reaching in and maneuvering that brake band around. And you got this top pin here where your steering lever goes into the top of the final drive. I think I might need to lift just a little bit. It's looking pretty good. Not too bad. There we go, pretty close. I think we'll start using some of these bolts to pull it in, and we'll see where we're at. You always want to check to make sure everything still turns, which it does. Make sure nothing's binding up. And just snug everything up. Don't have to go crazy with it. Get all our bolts in, and again, we'll double check, make sure everything still spins freely. And don't forget, there are 2 smaller bolts that go from the inside out on the bottom underneath. All right, all the bolts are tightened up. Just want to double check, make sure everything turns. I do have this in gear. Put it in neutral. Might turn a little easier. There we go. Good to go. That's one final drive in. We'll go ahead and throw the other side in, and then we'll make some clutch and brake adjustments. Well, there we have it. Both final drives are installed. I still have 4 more long bolts with these sleeves. If you remember, those go down here when we put the drawbar across. So we'll do that later on. We don't need to worry about that right now. All right, so the steering clutches and steering brakes work together. So as we've talked about, I'm sure many times before, when you want to steer left, you would pull back on this steering lever. So how this system works is when you pull back on this steering lever, the first thing it's going to do is it's going to disengage the clutch, or start to disengage the clutch inside this final drive. That'll allow this left-hand track to rotate freely as if it's in neutral. So it will continue to drive on the right-hand track and make the tractor turn left. If I continue to pull back further on this steering lever, not only is the clutch disengaged, but it's also going to engage the brake band that's in here. So now, instead of this left track just being in neutral and not allowed to roll freely on its own, and the right track driving, it's going to completely stop this left track while the right track drives. And it's, instead of just doing a slow steer, it's actually going to pivot, and basically the tractor can turn around on itself. So being as the clutches and brakes work together, they have to be adjusted together. And the first thing we need to do is set the clutch adjustment. All right, this might be a little tricky to see here on video, but we have our left steering lever and our right steering lever. So basically what we're going to do is we're going to take the side that we're adjusting, so this left steering lever, and we're going to pull it back 1 5/16 inches to 1 7/16 inches. So we'll just split that in the middle, 1 3/8. And it's going from roughly here at the top of the lever where this other lever bends. So what we're going to do is we're going to pull that back 1 3/8. Let's see, I'll put this little tape measure on here, or measuring stick. So we'll pull it back, and then I'll try to hold that there in one spot. I'm going to insert a screwdriver down here, trying to keep it in that right area. And a little bit of an adjustment. So I've got my left lever moved back by 1 3/8, and then I've inserted a screwdriver down here. Let me move this camera, give you a little better view. So basically, the tip of the screwdriver is between the lever and the stop here. I'll show you on the right-hand side where I don't have one in. So if I pull this lever back, you can see that lever stops right here on the casing. So I'll stick the screwdriver in there to maintain that distance of the 1 3/8 back. We have this front plug removed, and we're going to be working down inside there. So let me go ahead and zoom in and shine my light in there, and you're going to see that bolt head. That's a 1/2 inch socket size. And coming into frame, here's my 1/2 inch socket that I have electrical taped to my extension. We're going to send the socket down inside, and we're going to loosen that bolt. Do not take that bolt out, and don't pull it out too far. It'll drop down inside that final drive housing, and the next thing you'll be doing is pulling this final drive off again. So as you could probably see, hopefully, when I loosened that, this throw-up bearing slid out a little bit. Let me get this camera set up on a better angle so you can see better. Let's see if we can do this here. So, looking down inside, get my screwdriver here. This is the finger for the pressure plate. And this, if I can get it over there, is my throw-out bearing. So I want to slide this throw-out bearing against the fingers of the pressure plate right there, nice and easy. You can see the bolt that we had loosened up moved. Let me see if I can push it back so you can see the move. See the bolt move back, right? So we want to easily press this throw-out bearing against the fingers of the pressure plate right here. So the steering lever is back to 1 3/8. We've slid the throw-out bearing so it's just touching the fingers of the pressure plate. That's why it was so important to adjust those on the pressure plate when we had it apart. And then we're going to tighten down the 1/2 inch bolt that we had loosened up earlier. And that's it. That's how you adjust the clutch. It's really that easy. All right, there we are back at it. So we just pushed the throw-out bearing against the fingers of the pressure plate. Now I'm going to carefully reach in here and slowly turn this 1/2 inch bolt without upsetting the adjustment any. And once it's tight, I'll get in there and I'll get a nice snug. You don't have to go crazy. I'm just doing it with one hand as tight as I can with my left hand. I'm a right-handed person, so I don't know. German torque, good and tight. I'm sure if you read in the book, it'd probably tell you like 15, 18 foot-pounds or something. But anyway, that's all you need. You need it tight enough so that when you pull the clutch back, it doesn't throw it out of adjustment. See in there a little better. So now I've removed my screwdriver from the stop behind the steering lever, and I'm just going to move the steering lever really slow here. You can see that whole assembly moves, but there's still a gap right down there. The throw-out bearing, I can bounce it off that finger of the pressure plate there. So when the steering lever is all the way forward, that throw-out bearing is not touching those fingers at all. When I move it back the 1 3/8, it gets contact with those pressure plate fingers, and as I continue to pull it back, you'll see it'll start to press on those clutch fingers and disengage the clutch. So that's it. That's how that works. So the left-hand steering clutch is adjusted. Let's go ahead and adjust the brake. The brake adjustment is a two-step process. The first one is going to be that nut on the front side that we talked about earlier. And I really expressed how important it is to have that clean and lubricated, because it's not like a regular screw where you can just get a socket on it. You're going to have to reach in there with a flat tip screwdriver and you just kind of turn it, and you can do a quarter turn at a time. That's it. That's how you adjust that. So basically this nut on the bottom of it, I wish I had done a video before as a part, but basically there's a half moon indent in the bottom of that nut, and this dowel pin that goes through here works with that half moon indent. So every 2 turns of this, it kind of locks in place where that half moon sits over this dowel here. And then a quarter turn, it's sitting on the high ends, and then lock back in again. So basically, you just want to turn this in until it feels kind of tight, kind of snug. That's just getting your all your free play out of your brake band. So see, it's starting to get kind of snug there. So I'll get it back on the locking part, and then you back it off a half turn. So quarter, half. Make sure it's sitting in that detent. There it is. So now we've got the brake band adjusted. So the second part of adjusting the brakes is the steering lever to brake engagement. So basically what you want to do, again, you still have your 1/2 inch socket. It's still taped, so we don't drop it down inside. And we want to loosen that bolt until the bottom of it is flush. So this bolt is going to push on the brake arm actuator here. So for right now, we want it so it's out, so it's flush. We've loosened up our lock nut. And basically, we're going to pull this steering lever. You can watch over here in the video. I'm going to pull this steering lever back lightly until I can start to feel that throwout bearing touch the fingers of the pressure plate. Right? So here you can see it's got that play in there. I pull it back. I mean, I'm literally pulling it back with 3 fingers until it stops. I know it's hitting the pressure plate right there. So now I'm going to thread this bolt down until it stops, touches this plate down here. You're going to have to loosen up this lock nut here a little more. Hold on a second. All right, so I've driven the lock nut up to the top now. So let's go ahead and bring the bolt down. I'm going to pull it back till it's just touching. And I'm going to thread that bolt down until it just starts to touch on that plate right there. So basically at this point, when I pull this steering lever back, the throwout bearing is starting to make contact with the clutch pressure plate fingers, and this bolt is starting to make contact with this arm. At that point, I'm going to back this bolt out 1/2 turn. So I'll take this flat here and move it 180. And then we can put our socket on the bolt to hold it, and we'll tighten down the lock nut to hold it in place. There we go. All right, so now when we pull back on this steering clutch lever, I feel clutch finger to pressure plate engagement, and I still have about, I guess it's about 1/8 of an inch between the bottom of this bolt and that brake lever assembly. As I pull back further, it's disengaging the clutch right now, and I'm starting to engage the brake band. And that's it. So when I let go off, it's gonna stop pulling on the brake and finish engaging the clutch. And that's it. That's how you adjust your steering clutches and brake bands. I do want to add that me personally, I'll probably back this bolt out another turn. So it's 1.5 turns out. I don't do any aggressive turning where I really need to use these brakes much at all. I'd rather have it where I pull back on this lever and I just disengage the clutch and freewheel this track. You'll see sometimes when people are operating their crawlers and they're pulling back in their steering levers and the engine starts to die out. It's like it's too much load on it. It's because this brake is engaging and putting too much load on the drivetrain before the clutch disengages. So in my opinion, I'm just going to back this bolt out a little bit more. I'd rather make sure my clutch is fully disengaged before my brake engages. So again, once we have this thing back together, you'll have to make some more adjustments and see what works best for you. So before I move on to adjusting the right side, I'm going to finish putting this side together to prevent anything from falling down in here, water intrusion or anything. So I always replace these quart gaskets. They still make them from Deere. You can buy them aftermarket. The Deere part number is M1487T. And then here's the cover for it. You can see it's got a slit under here, under this taller part. It's kind of wedge shaped. That's the vent for it. So that's going to go at the bottom. So basically, if it rains out and this is outside, the water will go down. It won't go up inside and into the final drive, but it still allows as a vent for, air circulation and whatnot. And then, of course, the plug for the front, where our clutch adjustment is, you put that in. Keep everything sealed up real good. Now I've gone ahead and installed the brake adjustment cover and the clutch adjustment plug they're going to have to come back off. There's going to be fine adjustments that are going to have to be made. But being as I still have so much more to put together and paint, I just want to keep everything from getting in there. So, but if you were just doing your clutch, or eventually when it comes time for me to adjust everything, it's okay to operate it with these covers off, because you're going to have to make fine adjustments here and there. Alrighty, well, that's it for today's video. Got a whole bunch of work done today. We got both final drives installed, both steering clutches and brake assemblies adjusted. And as you can see, I've gone over everything with another coat of primer, because it's probably still going to be a few weeks until I can actually get this thing painted. I've got all the engine parts in, machine work's done. So hopefully next weekend we can get a good engine assembly video put together and get that thing out here and mount it up with the clutch and whatnot. And then at that point, I'll probably go ahead and spray this thing green so that that part's done. After that, we'll start working on the undercarriage roller assemblies, get those taken apart, cleaned, painted, whatnot, and then tracks, pads, fenders, hood, tank. Let's run it, see what happens, right? So anyway, that's about it. If you haven't checked out the video shorts section of my channel, I've uploaded a whole bunch of video shorts of old plow days and other tractors that I've restored. So check those out if you get a chance. I appreciate it for everyone who's subscribed. If you haven't yet, hit that little subscribe button. It helps so much. I really appreciate it. And thanks for all the support. So until the next video, peace.